Welcome to our channel. Before we begin this inspiring journey, make sure to like and subscribe. Every story is an opportunity to learn, grow, and discover your own strength. Let's step into the journey together. A Silent Morning, Chapter 1. The alarm rang softly, a thin, hesitant sound that seemed almost apologetic, as if it knew it would disturb the fragile peace of the early morning. Alex lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, tracing the faint cracks in the paint with his eyes, letting the silence stretch before him. The room was quiet, almost unnaturally so. The only sound was the distant hum of the city waking up, faint and muted behind his closed window. He rose slowly, feet touching the cold wooden floor with careful precision, as though each step required a conscious decision. There was a rhythm to his movements, quiet and deliberate, like the way someone navigates through memories they are not ready to confront. The kitchen smelled faintly of last night's coffee, lingering stubbornly despite the passing hours. He poured himself a cup, the liquid steaming gently, twisting into delicate shapes that dissipated into the morning air. Outside, the sky was a muted gray, clouds pressing low against the rooftops, the kind of sky that made the world feel smaller and more intimate. Alex leaned against the window, watching the streets slowly come alive. A delivery bike rattled by, a dog barked in the distance, and a newspaper landed awkwardly on a neighbor's porch. Life moved forward, indifferent to the stillness inside his apartment. He sipped his coffee and let the bitter warmth fill him, grounding him, if only for a few seconds. There was a subtle tension in the air, a quiet undercurrent that hummed through his thoughts. Today felt different, though he couldn't name why. Perhaps it was the way the light caught the edges of the blinds, cutting the room into sharp lines and shadows, or the unusual quiet that hung heavier than usual. Whatever it was, it made him uneasy. Alex's apartment was modest, practical, almost empty. There were hints of someone who once had dreams, but who now preferred simplicity. A stack of books, a small plant by the window, a guitar leaning in the corner gathering dust. Each item told a story of pauses, of deferred ambitions, of moments when life demanded patience or perhaps resignation. The walls held the echoes of laughter and arguments, but they seemed distant, like they belonged to someone else. He moved to the small table by the window, opening his laptop with a familiar click. The screen lit up, revealing emails, reminders, and tasks he had yet to confront. There was a weight in looking at it, a subtle pressure that came not from urgency, but from expectation, from the sense that he should already be further along in life than he was. He scrolled slowly, reading and deleting, replying and postponing. Each action felt mechanical, almost hollow, yet necessary to maintain the illusion of control. After a while, he closed the laptop, leaning back in his chair, letting his mind wander. He thought about the years that had led him here, the choices made and unmade, the opportunities missed, the moments of courage that had slipped by unnoticed. There was no dramatic tragedy, no grand catastrophe, just the quiet accumulation of small compromises and small regrets. It was a subtle kind of pain, one that didn't scream but whispered incessantly, a persistent shadow that stretched long and thin across the corners of his life. He glanced at the clock. There were still hours before the day would fully begin, and yet there was a strange sense of anticipation, as if something, however small, was about to shift. He didn't know what it was, but the feeling pressed against his chest in the most curious way, like the first breath before a long plunge underwater. Alex stood, stretching slowly, letting the stiffness in his shoulders loosen. He moved to the window again, this time opening it slightly, letting the cold air rush in and touch his skin. The city felt different from this perspective, alive in its own chaotic rhythm, yet distant enough to allow him a moment of detachment. He breathed in, letting the air fill his lungs, carrying with it the faint scent of rain and asphalt, and something else he couldn't quite name. Possibility, perhaps, or maybe just the faintest reminder that life, in all its complexity, always moves forward. And in that quiet morning, with nothing remarkable happening and yet everything subtly changing, Alex felt a strange, almost imperceptible shift. He didn't know the path ahead. He didn't know the challenges or the victories, the failures or the surprises, but for the first time in a long while, he felt ready to step into the day, ready to face the world, ready to take the first quiet, deliberate step into whatever lay beyond the confines of his familiar apartment and predictable life. It was a silent morning, unremarkable in every outward way, yet inside it carried a seed of transformation. And though he could not see it yet, though the day ahead stretched uncertain and unshaped, it was in that stillness, in that quiet observation of life moving without him, that something within Alex began to stir, a small, persistent flame, hinting that change, when it comes quietly, often arrives when we are least prepared, yet most ready. The Weight of Yesterday, Chapter 2. The morning light filtered through the blinds, painting thin stripes across Alex's desk. He sat in silence, coffee long forgotten, staring at the blank page on his notebook. The quiet of the apartment now felt heavier, almost oppressive, as if the walls themselves remembered every misstep, every lost chance, every quiet surrender he had ever made. He thought about the years that had brought him here, subtle, almost invisible moments that now carried enormous weight. There had been choices, yes, but not the kind that come with fireworks or dramatic fanfare, the kind that simply slipped by unnoticed, yet accumulate until one day they feel like chains. Alex remembered the day he turned down the project abroad, convincing himself he wasn't ready, telling himself, later, later, later never came. And then there was Lila. He hadn't thought of her in years, but that memory, sharp and unyielding, arrived uninvited. Her smile, so full of possibility, her laughter, a reminder of a world he had once imagined for himself. He had let fear and self-doubt win, letting their connection fade like smoke in an empty room. The regret wasn't about losing her, was about losing the version of himself he had been when he believed in more than the safe, the predictable, the expected. Alex closed his eyes and let himself sink into the past. He could see his father's face in flashes, stern, distant, yet not unkind. The silent expectations, the unspoken rules that had guided his youth, shaping him into someone who calculated every move, feared every failure, and measured every action against an invisible standard. That fear had lingered, morphing into hesitation, until hesitation had become habit. He could feel it now, the invisible weight pressing on his chest, pressing on his thoughts. Every decision he had made to avoid risk, every compromise with his own desires, had built this burden. And yet, within that weight, there was a strange, stubborn truth. He was still here, still breathing, still capable, still able to take a step, however small, into a world he had only observed from behind glass. Alex's phone buzzed, breaking the reverie. A notification from an old friend, someone who had watched him drift into quiet obscurity, someone who had not forgotten the fire he once carried. "Are you still thinking about going for it?" The message read, just for words, and yet they hit him like a splash of cold water. Going for it? What? When his fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure if he wanted to type back, unsure if he could. Memories of his younger self, brimming with curiosity and reckless ambition, flashed unbidden. The nights spent sketching plans for inventions that never left the page. The endless journal entries filled with ideas that had been swallowed by routine. He had been a dreamer once, and somewhere along the way, practicality had eclipsed imagination. But the spark, the tiniest flicker remained, hidden under layers of caution and regret. He walked to the mirror, leaning against the edge of the bathroom sink, staring at the reflection that seemed both familiar and foreign. The man staring back was older, yes, but not finished. The eyes, though tired, still held something unbroken, a subtle defiance, quiet but undeniable. Alex realized then that regret wasn't a cage, it was a teacher. Every hesitation, every missed opportunity, every painful lesson carried a secret, experience. And experience, if he dared to use it, could be transformed into momentum. The apartment was quiet again, but the silence no longer felt heavy. Instead, it felt like a canvas, waiting for a brushstroke, waiting for action. He could feel the weight of yesterday, yes, but now he could see it differently, not as chains, but as a foundation. Every regret, every failure, had built resilience, awareness, and perspective. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was the most valuable currency life had ever given him. Alex sat back down at his desk, opening the notebook again. His pen hovered, shaking slightly, uncertain if he could capture the thoughts swirling in his mind. Then he began to write, not plans for the future, not lists of goals, not instructions for some impossible ideal. He wrote what he remembered, the lessons, the failures, the truths he had ignored for too long. The words poured out slowly, deliberately, like a river carving a path through rock. Each line felt like a small liberation, a subtle acknowledgement that the past had shaped him, but it would not define him. And for the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of clarity. Life had been unkind in ways, yes, but not cruel. It had given him choices, and while he had made mistakes, he still had the power to act. The day stretched before him, long and undefined, full of potential and uncertainty. He did not yet know what he would do, or how he would change the course of his life. But he felt ready to face it, to confront the weight, to honor it, and to use it as fuel for the steps ahead. There was no dramatic revelation, no sudden epiphany, just a quiet understanding, almost imperceptible, that life was still in motion, and so was he. And in that quiet acceptance, there was power. Power not measured in achievements or recognition, but in the courage to face oneself honestly, to acknowledge both weakness and strength, and to take the first conscious step toward a life chosen, not endured. The coffee had gone cold, forgotten again, but Alex no longer noticed. He stood, stretching, feeling the subtle release of tension in his shoulders. The weight of yesterday was still there, yes, but now it felt different, less like a burden, and more like a companion, whispering lessons, urging patience, demanding courage. And with that understanding, Alex felt a quiet resolve settle within him. He would not be defined by what he had failed to do. He would be defined by what he chose to do next. An unexpected call. Chapter 3. The morning had settled into a rhythm of quiet contemplation when Alex's phone buzzed sharply on the desk, startling him out of the reflective haze he had been lost in. He picked it up almost hesitantly, as though touching it might pull him into a world he had long avoided. The screen showed an unknown number, something unfamiliar yet strangely urgent. "Hello," he said cautiously, his voice breaking the silence of the apartment. "Alex, it's Mara. Mara Jensen." The voice on the other end was brisk but not unkind, carrying the weight of urgency wrapped in familiarity. Alex froze. Mara had been a colleague years ago, someone who had believed in him when he barely believed in himself, someone whose enthusiasm had once been contagious. I didn't expect to hear from you," he managed to say, uncertainty lacing every syllable. "I know," Mara replied. "Listen, I'll get straight to the point. There's a project, something unprecedented, and we need someone like you. I know it's sudden, and I know your history, but I can't think of anyone else. It's starting in 2 weeks, and we need a decision soon." Alex felt his chest tighten. 1,000 questions surged at once. Unprecedented. Why me? 2 weeks. Could he even do it? Could he trust himself to step into something so uncertain after years of hesitation? He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling, as if answers might appear in the cracks of the plaster. The project sounded impossible, almost reckless, but that was precisely what made it magnetic. He had been craving movement, craving meaning, yet he had never imagined it would arrive in the form of an unexpected phone call, a challenge so sudden and unapologetic. "Tell me more," Alex said finally, his curiosity outweighing the fear. Mara outlined the project, a collaborative endeavor that would push boundaries, one that required ingenuity, courage, and resilience. It was risky, it was ambitious, it could fail spectacularly, and yet, every word she spoke ignited a spark in him he hadn't felt in years, the spark of possibility, of purpose, of being needed for something larger than himself. He listened, balancing the excitement against the fear. He could imagine the project's demands, the long hours, the uncertainty, the potential for failure. Yet he also imagined the alternative. Another day, another week, another year of quiet, routine, of life observed rather than lived. That vision felt suffocating, heavier than any challenge Mara could present. By the time the call ended, Alex was both exhilarated and terrified. He paced the small apartment, phone still clutched in his hand, replaying Mara's words in his mind. This was the moment, an opportunity that had arrived unbidden, unannounced, and unshaped. It demanded cour. He sat down again, fingers drumming nervously on the edge of the desk. The city outside seemed unchanged, indifferent, yet for Alex, everything felt different. The air carried a subtle electricity, as though the universe itself had tilted slightly, opening a door that had been invisible until now. He thought about the weight of yesterday, the regrets, the hesitations, the quiet compromises, and realized that they had prepared him for this. Every failure had been a lesson, every hesitation, a rehearsal for courage. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine success not in grandiose terms, but simply in being fully alive, fully engaged, fully present in the challenge ahead. He pictured himself immersed in the work, problem after problem, obstacle after obstacle, yet each small victory, each step forward, a testament to his resilience and creativity. The decision was not easy. Fear gnawed at the edges of his resolve, whispering doubts and worst-case scenarios. But deeper than fear was a quiet, insistent voice that had lain dormant for too long, the voice of possibility, the voice that said, "You are not done yet. You can still do extraordinary things. You can still rise." Alex finally exhaled, a long, deliberate breath that carried away the last traces of hesitation. He picked up the phone again, thumb hovering over the call button, and with a deliberate motion, pressed it. "I'm in," he said. Mara's laughter, bright and relieved, rang out through the receiver. "I knew you would be. Welcome back to the world of the living, Alex." As he hung up, a strange calm settled over him. The fear remained, yes, but it had transformed into something else: anticipation, determination, a readiness to face the unknown. The weight of yesterday still lingered, but now it felt like a foundation rather than a shackle. He moved to the window, opening it wide this time. The city's hum no longer felt distant. It was alive, vibrant, filled with possibility, and Alex felt himself part of it once again. The morning that had begun in quiet reflection had shifted, imperceptibly, into a threshold, a gateway into a chapter yet unwritten. And in that quiet apartment, amidst the ordinary sights and sounds of life, Alex realized something profound. Sometimes, change does not announce itself with fanfare. Sometimes it arrives softly, unexpectedly, in the form of a single phone call, a single word, a single decision that can alter everything. And when it does, it requires courage, decisiveness, and faith, not in the certainty of success, but in the certainty of action. That day, Alex took his first deliberate step toward a life that had long seemed just beyond reach. It was a step into uncertainty, yes, but also into possibility. And in that step, he began to reclaim not only his ambition, but himself. First Step into the Unknown, Chapter 4. The following morning, Alex woke earlier than usual. The sun had not yet fully risen, but he was already awake, restless, and strangely alert. His apartment, once a sanctuary of quiet contemplation, now felt like a launch pad, a place from which he would leap into the unknown. He dressed slowly, deliberately, choosing clothes that were functional, comfortable, yet somehow symbolic of a new beginning. Every movement felt loaded with intention, as though each small act was a rehearsal for courage. He glanced at the mirror, catching his own reflection, a man poised at the edge of change, fear and anticipation mingling in his eyes. The city outside was still waking. Streetlights flickered as the morning traffic began to stir. The air smelled faintly of damp asphalt and fresh pastries from a nearby bakery. Alex stepped outside, the chill pressing against his skin, sharp, enough to jolt his senses fully awake. It was a small detail, inconsequential in itself, yet somehow significant, a reminder that life is often found in these minute, overlooked moments. The path ahead was unclear. He didn't know what challenges awaited, what mistakes he might make, or how success might even look. The project Mara had called about loomed in the distance, abstract yet tangible, filled with possibilities and peril. And yet, for the first time in years, Alex felt the thrill of movement, the sensation of stepping into a current that might carry him forward. The first steps were awkward. He arrived at the project site and felt immediately out of place, a visitor in a world of energy and purpose that he had long observed only from the periphery. People moved with certainty, their gestures confident, their eyes alight with the intensity of shared mission. Alex felt the familiar twinge of doubt, the old whisper of inadequacy, but he breathed deeply, reminding himself that hesitation was not a crime, only a challenge to be faced. He introduced himself, hands slightly trembling, voice steadying as he spoke. Faces turned toward him, some curious, some skeptical. Mara gave him a subtle nod of encouragement. It was small, but it was enough to remind him that courage often begins with the simplest acts, showing up, speaking, placing one foot in front of the other. The first task was deceptively simple: observing, understanding the flow of work, identifying patterns that were invisible to untrained eyes. Alex approached it cautiously, letting his instincts guide him, letting his mind absorb every detail, every nuance. He felt like a student again, the kind who learns through curiosity rather than rote memorization. the kind who finds joy in discovery rather than achievement alone. Mistakes were inevitable. He misread a diagram, hesitated at a critical moment, and felt the sting of embarrassment. Yet no one berated him. Instead, guidance came in quiet, patient instructions, as if the environment itself understood that growth required room for error. Alex realized that this was part of the unknown, the simultaneous fear of failing and the thrill of learning that failure carries within it. Hours passed, marked by small victories and subtle lessons. A correct observation here, a clever adjustment there. Each success, no matter how minor, felt monumental, like a step up a hidden staircase that led somewhere promising. By the end of the day, he was exhausted, physically and mentally, yet exhilarated in a way he hadn't been for years. That night, walking home under the soft glow of streetlights, Alex reflected on the day. He realized something crucial. The unknown is not something to fear in itself. It is a canvas, blank yet full of possibility, waiting for action to shape it. First step is always the hardest, yet it carries the greatest potential, because movement itself generates momentum, and momentum carries courage along with it. Back in his apartment, he sat at the desk and opened the notebook once more. The pen moved quickly, recording not just events, but emotions, insights, and reflections. He wrote about hesitation and courage, failure and growth, fear and anticipation. He wrote about the strange exhilaration of being alive, fully, in a way that no routine or repetition had ever allowed. Sleep came slowly that night, but it was deep, restorative, and layered with a quiet pride. Alex had stepped into the unknown, and though he could not predict what awaited, he knew that he had begun something vital. He was no longer merely observing life, he was part of its unfolding, active in the creation of his own story. In the quiet of the night, a thought lingered persistently. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the decision to act despite it. Alex did not say the words aloud, yet they resonated within him, a quiet mantra to carry forward. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new uncertainties, and new moments of doubt, but for now, he allowed himself a brief, deliberate satisfaction in the simple, powerful act of having started, of having taken that first step into the unknown. The first day of a journey rarely changes everything at once. Yet for Alex, it had changed something fundamental, the way he saw himself in the world. He had chosen action over hesitation, curiosity over doubt, engagement over avoidance, and, in that choice, the seed of transformation had been planted, a seed that, with care, patience, and courage, could grow into something extraordinary. As the city slept, Alex sat by the window, looking at the distant lights flickering across rooftops. Somewhere out there, lives continued, each filled with its own unknowns and first steps. But tonight, he felt a quiet connection to it all, not as a passive observer, but as an active participant. He was walking a path of his own making, step by deliberate step, into the vast, unpredictable, yet infinitely promising world that awaited. Early Struggles, Chapter 5. The first days of the project had been exhilarating, filled with small victories and the thrill of stepping into uncharted territory. But as the novelty began to fade, the weight of reality settled in, heavy and insistent. Alex quickly realized that ambition alone could not navigate the labyrinth of challenges ahead. The morning began like any other, with the faint hum of the city outside and the crisp light spilling through the windows. But inside the workspace, tension simmered. A complex problem had arisen overneath a design flaw that threatened to derail weeks of progress. The team was tense, whispers of frustration threading through the air like an undercurrent. Alex felt it immediately, the pressure pressing down, sharper than anything he had felt in his quiet apartment. He approached the task cautiously, reviewing notes, diagrams, and reports. The error seemed small at first glance, but the more he delved, the more he understood its ripple effects. Every calculation, every decision, every adjustment seemed to interact in unforeseen ways. Frustration began to creep in, not just his own, but that of colleagues who depended on solutions he had yet to provide. The old whispers of doubt returned, insidious and persuasive. "You're not ready. You're out of your depth. You'll fail." Alex took a deep breath, recalling the mantra he had embraced the day he took the first step. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to act despite it. He forced himself to slow down, to break the problem into smaller pieces, to tackle each obstacle individually, rather than letting the magnitude of the challenge consume him. Hours passed in near silence, punctuated only by the scratching of pens, the soft click of keyboards, and occasional muttered observations. He made mistakes, misreading a specification, overlooking a minor inconsistency, but each mistake taught him something new. Each error, frustrating as it was, revealed the nuances of a system far more complex than he had anticipated. He began to see patterns, hidden interactions, and subtle dynamics that had escaped even the more experienced members of the team. Yet the struggle was not only technical. Alex grappled with his own impatience, his self-criticism, and the fear that he was proving himself inadequate. Sleep came in fragments, and when he returned home each night, he felt the familiar ache of exhaustion pressing into every muscle. Doubt whispered persistently, tempting him to retreat into old habits of hesitation and avoidance. One evening, after yet another long day filled with incremental progress and setbacks, Alex sat alone on the roof of his apartment building, looking out over the city. The lights below twinkled like stars, each one a tiny world, each one carrying its own burdens and victories. He realized that he was not alone in facing struggle, though isolation often made it feel that way. Everyone, somewhere, carried a weight similar to his own, a weight of expectation, fear, and ambition. That night, he allowed himself a moment of reflection. The early struggles, though painful, were shaping him in ways that comfort never could. The challenges forced him to confront his limits, to acknowledge weaknesses, and to discover reserves of patience and ingenuity he had not known he possessed. Each small victory, each lesson learned, was a step toward mastery, not of the project alone, but of himself. Over the next few days, the intensity increased. A crucial component failed unexpectedly, setting back progress by days. Arguments flared among team members, tensions rising as stress levels soared. Alex felt the sting of criticism, the weight of responsibility, and the sharp edge of self-doubt. Yet through it all, he noticed something remarkable. The same environment that tested him also nurtured him. Mentorship, collaboration, and quiet guidance from more experienced colleagues provided a scaffold that allowed him to navigate the turbulence without collapsing under it. By confronting the early struggles head-on, Alex discovered a rhythm to the chaos. He learned to anticipate complications, to ask questions before problems escalated, and to communicate effectively even under stress. Slowly, the fear that had initially paralyzed him began to transform into a disciplined focus, a mental sharpness honed through necessity. He understood now that struggle was not an obstacle to success. It was the pathway. Without friction, growth remained abstract and unrealized. One afternoon, while reviewing a particularly convoluted calculation, he realized he had solved a problem that had stumped others for days. The team noticed, nodding in acknowledgement, and a quiet sense of validation settled over him. It was not triumph in the grand sense, no applause, no fanfare, but it was profoundly satisfying. The victory was private, subtle, yet transformative. It confirmed what he had suspected all along. Persistence, observation, and courage in the face of struggle yielded results, even when the path was obscured and arduous. That night, returning home, Alex wrote in his notebook. He described the frustrations, the lessons, the moments of doubt, and the flickers of insight. He noted the exhaustion, but also the exhilaration that came from confronting challenges directly. And for the first time, he began to perceive a pattern. Struggle was not the enemy. It was a teacher, a guide, a catalyst for transformation. As he closed the notebook, he felt a quiet resolve solidifying within him. The early struggles, painful and relentless, were the first true test of his courage, resilience, and determination. They were shaping him into the person capable of facing the unknown with poise and insight. And though he knew more challenges awaited, more failures and frustrations, he no longer feared them. Each obstacle was now an opportunity, each setback a lesson, and each moment of doubt a reminder that growth demanded both patience and audacity. In the dim glow of his apartment, Alex finally allowed himself to rest, carrying with him a subtle but powerful awareness. The path of transformation is rarely easy, but those who endure the early struggles are the ones who discover not only their potential but also the depth of their strength. And as he drifted into sleep, the city's hum outside his window felt less like a distant noise and more like a chorus of possibility, welcoming him into the ongoing rhythm of life, challenge, and quiet victory. A Stranger's Wisdom, Chapter 6. The day began like any other. the sunlight cutting through the tall windows of the workspace, illuminating papers, sketches, and the quiet tension that hung in the air. Alex felt the weight of the ongoing project still pressing on his shoulders, a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration shaping every move. Yet, amidst the routine of problem-solving, a subtle sense of unease had begun to creep in. He had been working relentlessly, focused entirely on tasks and solutions, but something inside him felt incomplete, as if he were missing a perspective, a guidepost in the fog of uncertainty. It was during a brief coffee break, stepping outside onto the narrow alley behind the building, that he noticed an older man sitting on a worn bench. The man was modestly dressed, carrying a simple satchel, his posture relaxed yet purposeful. He was sketching something in a small notebook, lines flowing effortlessly across the page. Something about him caught Alex's attention, not his appearance, but the quiet intensity of his focus, the calm certainty in every motion. The man looked up and caught Alex's gaze. There was a spark of recognition, not in identity but in understanding. Without a word, he gestured to the empty space beside him. Alex hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of self-consciousness, yet the curiosity that had brought him here overpowered his hesitation. He sat down, the bench creaking softly under the combined weight of two strangers and the unspoken promise of conversation. For a long moment, neither spoke. The city's distant hum was a soft accompaniment to the silence. Then the man spoke, his voice quiet yet resonant, carrying a rhythm that demanded attention. "You look like someone carrying too many invisible weights." Alex chuckled nervously, unsure whether to acknowledge or deny it. "I suppose, yes, perhaps I am. Everyone is," the man said simply. "But not everyone knows which of those weights belong to them, and which are borrowed from expectation, from fear, from what they imagine others want them to carry." Alex paused, absorbing the words. There was an unusual clarity in the stranger's statement, a truth that struck deeper than any advice he had received in years. "How do you know?" he asked. The man smiled, faintly, almost imperceptibly. "Because I have walked through my own shadows, and I have learned that clarity comes not from solving everything at once, but from understanding which burdens are worth keeping and which must be released." He held up his notebook, showing sketches not just of objects, but of abstract shapes, flowing lines that seemed to dance across the page. "See these lines? Each one is a path, uncertain and unpredictable. Yet within the chaos, there is coherence, if you know where to look." Alex leaned closer, intrigued. "And what if you can't see the path clearly? Then you take a step," the man said simply. "One small step. Observe the consequences. Adjust. One step leads to another, and soon the path begins to reveal itself not as a straight line, but as a sequence of deliberate choices. Fear will accompany you, yes, but courage is not the absence of fear, it is the decision to move despite it." The words resonated profoundly. Alex realized that he had been attempting to navigate the project and his life as if clarity and certainty were prerequisites for action. He had hesitated, overthought, and second-guessed himself, all in pursuit of a perfect understanding that would never arrive. The stranger's wisdom cut through the paralysis. Action did not demand perfection, it demanded awareness, adaptability, and courage. For a long while, they sat in silence again, the city alive around them, yet irrelevant to the private universe they shared on that bench. The man spoke occasionally, not in directives, but in gentle questions that challenged Alex to reflect. What matters most? Which choices align with your truth? Which weights are yours to bear? Each question was a spark, igniting a series of realizations in Alex's mind. Before leaving, the man offered a final thought. Remember this: the unknown is never empty. It is full of possibilities waiting to be noticed, discovered, and nurtured. Your courage does not need to roar, it needs to act, quietly, deliberately, consistently, one step at a time. Alex watched him walk away, feeling the imprint of the encounter linger in his chest. The words were simple, but they carried a weight and clarity he could not ignore. He returned to the project with a renewed sense of purpose, seeing challenges, not as threats, but as opportunities to act, observe, and adjust. That afternoon, when a particularly perplexing problem threatened to stall progress, Alex remembered the stranger's words. He stopped, observed carefully, and made a subtle adjustment. The solution was not dramatic, not flashy, but effective. His colleagues noticed, nodding in acknowledgement, and for the first time, Alex felt the satisfaction of combining insight with deliberate action. The wisdom of a stranger, brief yet profound, had shifted something fundamental in him. He began to understand that mentorship, inspiration, and guidance do not always come in formal or prolonged forms. Sometimes it is a single interaction, a single observation, a single question that opens a door previously invisible. And in opening that door, the path forward becomes slightly clearer, not entirely mapped, but navigable. That night, Alex wrote extensively in his notebook. He recorded the encounter, the words, and his reflections, savoring the clarity they had provided. He realized that the journey was no longer just about completing tasks or achieving goals. It was about cultivating awareness, embracing uncertainty, and acting with intention. Each challenge, each decision, each moment of doubt was now an opportunity to practice this wisdom, to refine his approach, and to grow not just professionally, but personally. As he closed the notebook and prepared for sleep, Alex felt a quiet, yet profound shift within himself. The early struggles had tested him, the project had challenged him, and now the stranger's wisdom had illuminated a path forward. It was not a path without difficulty, nor one free from fear, but it was a path he was ready to walk step by deliberate step, embracing both the unknown and the possibilities it contained. And as the city settled into the deep hum of night, Alex felt a rare peace, a sense of alignment, purpose, and readiness. The journey ahead was still uncertain, yet the seed of clarity had been planted, and with each deliberate action, each step into the unknown, he knew he was moving closer to the person he was meant to become. Breaking Point, Chapter 7. The weeks that followed had been grueling. Alex had grown accustomed to challenges, learned to navigate setbacks, and had begun to see opportunities in struggle. Yet, despite progress, the universe seemed determined to test him further. One morning, as he entered the workspace, he felt an unusual tension in the air, thicker, heavier than before. Something had shifted. A critical component of the project had failed overnight. Not just any component, but one central to the success of the entire operation. The implications were immediate and severe. Deadlines at risk, team morale collapsing, and the pressure now focused squarely on Alex. The responsibility, once a manageable weight, now felt like a boulder pressing down on his chest. He tried to steady himself, repeating the mantra of courage he had internalized. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to act despite it. But fear now screamed louder than ever. Every option seemed flawed, every potential solution risky. Time was short, resources were limited, and the expectations of the team and of himself were unforgiving. Hours stretched into long, tense deliberations. Alex pored over designs, calculations, and contingency plans, each attempt to find a solution meeting a new complication. The frustration built, coiling in his stomach like a living thing. Colleagues voiced their own concerns, and their voices, though reasonable, became another layer of pressure. The silence between discussions was thick, the tension palpable. For the first time in his journey, Alex questioned his own competence. Doubt gnawed at him relentlessly. Maybe you're not ready. Maybe this is too much. Maybe you've reached your limit. The familiar comfort of hesitation tempted him. Avoid, defer, but he resisted. Retreat was no longer an option. The stakes were higher than his personal comfort. Lives, ambitions, and months of effort depended on decisive action. Late into the night, Alex sat alone in the lab, staring at the tangled web of data, diagrams, and calculations before him. He felt a rare vulnerability, the kind that comes not from fear of the unknown, but from confronting one's own limits. He realized that breaking points are not caused solely by external pressures. They arise from the collision of expectations, responsibility, and the human heart's resistance to strain. Exhaustion blurred the line between clarity and confusion. Hands trembling, mind buzzing with every possible failure scenario, Alex considered giving in. It would have been easier surrender to fatigue, to fear, to the invisible voice that had whispered, "You cannot." But beneath the turmoil, a quieter voice emerged, one he had cultivated through struggle, mentorship, and reflection. "You have faced adversity before. You have survived. You can navigate this too." Summoning every ounce of focus, he returned to the problem. Step by deliberate step, he dissected each failure, examined assumptions, and tested solutions methodically. Hours passed. Mistakes were made and corrected. Frustration and determination intertwined, forming a rhythm, a momentum that pushed him forward. Finally, in the small hours of the morning, a breakthrough emerged. It was subtle, not a grand solution, but a sequence of adjustments that aligned the component, resolved the immediate risk, and stabilized the project. Alex leaned back, gasping. In exhaustion and relief, the boulder of pressure had not vanished, but it had shifted, transformed into a tangible testament to persistence and courage. The team, exhausted but relieved, gathered around him. There was no applause, no dramatic celebration, only quiet acknowledgement and mutual respect. Alex realized that crises do not always produce fanfare. They produce growth, resilience, and the silent satisfaction of having faced fear head-on and prevailed. As he walked home, the city lights blurred through tired eyes. The night was cold, but for the first time in weeks, Alex felt a warmth within, a quiet flame that had endured the storm. He understood now that breaking points are not moments to fear. They are moments that define us. They strip away pretenses, reveal true character, and illuminate the resilience embedded within us. That night, writing in his notebook, Alex reflected on the experience. He documented not just the technical solutions, but the emotional journey: fear, doubt, frustration, exhaustion, and ultimately, triumph. He wrote about the importance of facing challenges directly, of taking deliberate action in the midst of chaos, and of trusting in one's cultivated resilience. He realized something profound. The breaking point is not an end, but a threshold. Beyond it lies clarity, growth, and the ability to face future challenges with a deeper understanding of one's own strength. Alex understood that true courage is forged in moments like this, when fear and responsibility collide, and one chooses action over retreat. As sleep finally claimed him, Alex felt an unwavering sense of resolve. The journey had tested him, shaped him, and revealed dimensions of his character he had not fully known. The path ahead remained uncertain, filled with unknowns and potential setbacks, but the breaking point had proven a vital truth: he could endure, adapt, and emerge stronger. In the quiet of the night, the city hummed around him, indifferent yet alive. And for the first time, Alex felt fully aligned with both himself and the challenges before him. Warrior not of physical battles, but of the inner conflicts that shaped destiny. The breaking point had come, and he had crossed it, stronger, wiser, and more ready than ever to continue the journey into the unknown. A glimpse of victory, Chapter 8. The days following the breaking point were different. The weight of crisis had lifted slightly, leaving behind clarity, focus, and an unspoken determination. Alex moved through the workspace with a sense of purpose, every step measured, every decision deliberate. The lessons of struggle had crystallized. Fear could be harnessed, pressure could sharpen, and perseverance could transform doubt into insight. A particularly challenging phase of the project had arrived at, a series of tests that would determine whether the months of effort would culminate in progress or collapse. Alex approached the task cautiously, mindful of past mistakes, but emboldened by the knowledge that he had endured far worse. Each calculation, adjustment, and observation was executed with precision, guided by both experience and instinct. The atmosphere in the workspace was tense. Team members moved with quiet intensity, aware of the stakes, yet motivated by the shared goal. Alex noticed subtle shifts in their demeanor: glances of confidence, small nods of acknowledgement, brief smiles when progress was achieved. The energy was contagious, feeding his own focus and reinforcing the sense that they were no longer simply individuals working separately, but a cohesive force moving toward a common outcome. Hours passed in meticulous effort. Alex encountered obstacles, as always, yet each was approached differently now. Instead of panic or self-recrimination, he relied on observation, adaptability, and calm persistence. Solutions emerged gradually, often in unexpected ways, and he learned to recognize the small signs of progressive change in data: a corrected alignment, a successful test run. Each subtle success was a thread weaving a larger tapestry of achievement. By late afternoon, a significant breakthrough occurred. A complex problem that had resisted solutions for weeks finally yielded under their combined efforts. Alex had contributed the critical insight that connected previously disjointed pieces, allowing the team to move forward. The moment was quiet, understated, but profound. There were no dramatic celebrations, only the deep, collective exhalation of relief and accomplishment. Alex paused to reflect. Victory, he realized, was rarely sudden or explosive. It was often incremental, composed of countless small actions, failures, corrections, and insights. The thrill was not in the immediate recognition, but in the confirmation that persistence, courage, and deliberate effort could indeed yield tangible results. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to feel pride, not the brash pride of ego, but the quiet satisfaction of a task well navigated, a challenge overcome. Later, as he walked home, the city felt different. The streets seemed imbued with energy, the air carrying the subtle scent of possibility. Alex considered the journey so far, the initial hesitation, the unexpected call, the early struggles, the wisdom of a stranger, and the breaking point. Each phase had prepared him for this moment, culminating in a glimpse of victory that was both a reward and a promise. That night, he reflected in his notebook, capturing not just the technical details of success, but the emotional and psychological growth that accompanied it. He wrote about the importance of patience, resilience, and collaboration. He documented the subtle lessons, the power of observation, the necessity of adapting to unforeseen circumstances, and the understanding that true achievement is constructed, step by step, rather than stumbled upon by chance. The glimpse of victory illuminated a larger truth. Progress is often invisible until it crystallizes at a pivotal moment. The struggle, effort, and learning that preceded it were not wasted. They were essential. Alex understood that each challenge faced, each failure endured, and each insight gained were integral to the construction of success. The journey itself was as valuable as the outcome, and the small victories along the way were markers of growth, resilience, and capability. In the quiet of his apartment, Alex allowed himself a moment of reflection, letting the sense of accomplishment settle fully. The path ahead remained uncertain, with new obstacles yet to emerge, but he felt stronger, more capable, and more confident in his ability to navigate the unknown. Victory, he realized, was not an endpoint, but a guide, a light, illuminating the way forward, reminding him that perseverance, courage, and deliberate action could overcome even the most formidable challenges. As sleep claimed him that night, Alex dreamed of possibilities, of potential achievements, unforeseen opportunities, and the continuation of a journey that had transformed him profoundly. The glimpse of victory was more than success. It was affirmation that he could endure, adapt, and thrive, even when the world pressed hardest against him. It was a reminder that resilience, courage, and persistence are the true architects of achievement. And as the city hummed softly outside, Alex understood something fundamental. Victory is sweetest, not when it is expected, but when it emerges from the culmination of struggle, insight, and unwavering commitment. It is a beacon for the path ahead, a proof that the unknown, no matter how daunting, is always navigable for those willing to step forward with courage, awareness, and persistence. The Turning Point, Chapter 9. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the workspace, casting long shadows across scattered papers and blueprints. Alex entered with a quiet determination, the residual energy from the glimpse of victory still coursing through him. But today felt different, not just another day of incremental progress, but a day pregnant with possibility, the kind that makes one sense that a pivotal moment is near. The project had reached a critical phase. Weeks of effort, problem-solving, failures, and minor successes had all led to this moment. The team was tense, yet focused, their collective attention honing in on the culmination of months of work. Alex felt the familiar flutter of anxiety, but now it was tempered by confidence and clarity. He understood that tension and excitement were not enemies, they were indicators of significance. As the morning progressed, a particularly complex issue arose, one that could determine the overall outcome of the project. It was a problem that had resisted solutions from even the most experienced members of the team. Alex felt the weight, immediately, yet he did not falter. He remembered the wisdom of the stranger, the lessons of the breaking point, and the subtle thrill of earlier victories. Action, deliberate and thoughtful, was now his ally. He began to dissect the problem with meticulous care, examining every angle, testing assumptions, and exploring unconventional approaches. The team watched, some skeptical, some trusting, as he navigated the labyrinth of challenges. For the first time, Alex noticed that the collective energy of the team had shifted. They were not merely participants, but collaborators, their insights amplifying his own understanding. Hours passed in concentrated effort. Mistakes were made, adjusted, and learned from. Yet each iteration brought him closer to clarity, each misstep refining the path forward. Alex felt a strange rhythm emerging, a flow in which thought and action harmonized, uncertainty and courage intertwined. He realized that this was the essence of mastery, not perfection, but the ability to navigate complexity with composure and insight. By late afternoon, the breakthrough came. It was subtle yet profound, a chain of decisions and adjustments that unlocked a solution the team had not imagined possible. Alex's insight connected disparate pieces, harmonizing them into a coherent whole. The tension in the room dissolved into a shared sense of awe and accomplishment. The breakthrough was not flashy, not theatrical, but it carried the weight of months of struggle, reflection, and growth. In that moment, Alex felt a profound shift within himself. It was not just professional success he experienced, but a deeper realization. The turning point was not merely the solution itself, but the transformation it represented. He had navigated fear, uncertainty, and immense pressure. He had learned to act deliberately despite doubt, to trust in his judgment, and to embrace collaboration as a source of strength. He understood now that true turning points are both external and internal. Change outcomes, but they also change the person who achieves them. The team celebrated quietly, exchanging nods, smiles, and gestures of acknowledgement. There was no grand fanfare, no applause, only the subtle satisfaction of accomplishment earned through resilience, patience, and courage. Alex recognized that the turning point was not just a personal victory, it was a collective achievement, a testament to the power of teamwork, shared vision, and trust in one another. That evening, as he walked home beneath the warm glow of streetlights, Alex reflected on the journey. Every struggle, every lesson, every insight had converged into this moment. He thought of the early hesitation, the first steps into the unknown, the wisdom of the stranger, the breaking point, and the glimpse of victory. Each had contributed to this turning point, each had shaped his understanding, and each had strengthened his resolve. Sitting at his desk, he opened his notebook and began to write, capturing the culmination of experience, insight, and emotion. He wrote about the transformative power of challenges, the importance of deliberate action, and the value of resilience. In the face of adversity, he reflected on the subtle yet profound realization that turning points are earned. They are not moments of luck, but the product of persistence, courage, and mindful engagement. Alex realized that the turning point marked not the end of his journey, but the beginning of a higher stage. It was a threshold, a transition from struggling to thriving, from uncertainty to insight, from doubt to deliberate confidence. The path forward was still filled with unknowns, but he now carried the tools, awareness, and courage to navigate them effectively. In the quiet of the night, he allowed himself a moment of gratitude, not just for the breakthrough, but for the entire journey that had led to it. He recognized the subtle truth that growth is rarely linear. It is composed of struggle, reflection, insight, and action. The turning point was the proof of this truth, a tangible reminder that courage and persistence yield transformation, both in results and in self. As sleep drew near, Alex felt a profound alignment between purpose and action. The city's distant hum was no longer background noise, but a testament to life's persistent rhythm. He understood that every turning point carries with it a responsibility, merely to maintain success, but to continue growing, learning, and embracing the unknown with courage and clarity. The turning point had arrived, and with it, the realization that he was no longer merely a participant in life's unfolding. He had become an active architect of his own journey, capable of transforming challenges into opportunity, uncertainty into clarity, and struggle into mastery. And as he drifted into rest, he carried with him the quiet, unwavering knowledge that the best was yet to come, that every deliberate step forward, no matter how uncertain, was a building block in the construction of his destiny. The journey continues. Chapter 10. Morning broke with a soft, golden light spilling into Alex's apartment. The city hummed quietly outside, as if acknowledging the passage of time and the milestones achieved within it. Alex sat at his desk, notebook open, reflecting on the journey he had traversed. The path had been anything but linear, mosaic of challenges, failures, lessons, and small victories, but every step had shaped him into someone stronger, wiser, and more capable. The project that once seemed insurmountable now stood as a testament to perseverance, collaboration, and courage. Alex had faced uncertainty, made mistakes, and endured moments of intense doubt. Yet, through it all, he had learned the critical lessons that formal education could never teach: the value of deliberate action, the transformative power of resilience, and the clarity that arises from embracing the unknown rather than fearing it. He remembered the first step he had taken, hesitant and uncertain, the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. He recalled the early struggles, when each problem felt like an insurmountable obstacle, and the breaking points that tested the limits of his endurance. He thought of the stranger's wisdom, brief but profound, that had illuminated the path and reminded him that courage is action in spite of fear. And he remembered the first glimpse of victory, small and quiet, yet monumental, in its confirmation that persistence yields tangible results. Now, at this point in his journey, Alex realized that the destination was never the goal, it was the journey itself. Every challenge faced, every insight gained, every moment of doubt and triumph had been building him, shaping his character and capacity to navigate the unpredictable currents of life. The victories mattered, but only insofar as they taught him to act, adapt, and endure. As he prepared for the day, Alex carried with him a renewed sense of purpose. The lessons learned would guide him not only in professional endeavors but in every aspect of life. He understood that growth is a continuous process, one that demands curiosity, courage, and conscious engagement. Life, like the project he had completed, was a series of challenges, each an opportunity to apply the principles he had cultivated: observation, patience, deliberate action, and resilience. Stepping outside, the city greeted him as it always had, yet he felt a subtle difference. The streets, the buildings, the people, they were the same, but his perception had shifted. He moved with awareness, noticing the rhythm of life around him, the small details often overlooked, and the infinite potential hidden in ordinary moments. He understood that the journey continues, that each day brings a new canvas on which to act, learn, and grow. Throughout the day, Alex engaged with his work and colleagues with a renewed sense of confidence and presence. Challenges arose, as they always would, but he approached them with composure, curiosity, and the courage to experiment and learn. Mistakes were no longer sources of shame, but tools for refinement and insight. Successes, both large and small, were opportunities to reflect, consolidate knowledge, and prepare for the next endeavor. In quiet moments, he reflected on the subtle truths that had emerged from his journey: that fear is a companion, not an enemy; that growth often comes disguised as struggle; that wisdom can be found in unexpected encounters; and that the smallest steps, taken deliberately, often lead to the most profound transformations. These insights were not abstract concepts, they were living lessons, embedded in his actions, decisions, and evolving mindset. As evening fell, Alex returned home, weary but invigorated. He opened his notebook once more, capturing reflections, insights, and plans for the future. He wrote not just about accomplishments, but about the principles that had guided him, the strategies that had proven effective, and the mindset that had allowed him to navigate uncertainty and pressure. He documented the continuity of growth, the importance of remaining adaptable, and the enduring value of courage, curiosity, and persistence. Before sleep, he paused by the window, gazing at the city lights that stretched endlessly into the night. A quiet smile formed on his lips, a recognition that the journey is infinite. Each day a new chapter, each challenge a new lesson, and each decision an opportunity to align with purpose. He understood that life does not present final destinations. It offers continuous invitations to act, learn, and evolve. And as he drifted into rest, he embraced a powerful certainty: the journey continues, and he is fully equipped to walk it with courage, awareness, and resilience. Each step forward is a declaration of intent, each challenge an opportunity, and each moment of reflection a source of wisdom. The unknown remains vast, unpredictable, and exhilarating, but he has discovered the capacity within himself to navigate it with confidence and grace. Alex's story, while unique, reflects a universal truth: growth, courage, and mastery are cultivated through deliberate action, reflection, and resilience. The journey is not merely about reaching a goal, it is about becoming the person capable of thriving amidst uncertainty, embracing challenge, and finding opportunity where others see only obstacles. The city slept, Yet life persisted, unending and vibrant. And in the quiet of the night, Alex rested with the profound understanding that every beginning, every struggle, and every triumph was part of a larger continuum. The journey continues, as it always will, and with each deliberate, courageous step, he moves ever closer to realizing his fullest potential. Thank you for watching. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Remember, every challenge is a chance to grow, and every step forward takes you closer to your true potential. See you in the next journey.